let's see, it'll be 1 second. I never know exactly when it goes live. So, but I think, okay, cool. We are live. Welcome to the third event in Vega, where we hear from the builders of Vega. We're unraveling what they're working on and different concepts or tools or ideas. So the idea is that we have these people working on it, talk about it first, and then for anyone following along, please ask any questions that you may have in the chat, and we will get to them at the end. And of course, if you're watching this later, you can always come and ask any questions you may have in the Discord, where the whole Vega team is hanging out, making memes, and replying to all your questions. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about staking. And yeah, going deep into that, we have blockchain researcher Dr. Klaus Kurzala and smart contracts engineer Danny Holland with us. So with that, I'm going to give over to them. And yeah, any questions, write in the chat and we'll get to it. Thank you.
Thanks for that intro, Christina. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny. Klaus is this.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
Klaus.
Yeah,
he doesn't know his queue. It's fine. It's all good. We didn't talk about queues before. It's fine. So today we're talking about staking. So hey, Klaus, why are we staking? Why are we staking on Vega?
Well, the protocol below Vega is called a proof of stake protocol, so it sort of does help to have some stake. So essentially, the basic idea is we want to motivate validators to act in the best interest of the network. And the best way to do this is by distributing stake. And we do this also through delegation. So the real stakeholders are not the validator. So in the original idea behind proof of stake was I have my own skin in the game, so I act good because I own the network. We have one indirection. It's a little bit also what Polkadot is doing. The stakeholders are the token owners, and they delegate to validators. So if you want to be a successful validator on Vega, you better make sure you interact with the community and you build a trust relationship so that the people that own the network, that profit from the network, that operate on the network, delegate stake to you, that you then represent and can work as an efficient validator, and in that sense also make money.
Hey, so if you're worried about trust and like building up community and all this stuff, does that mean that the validators are not anonymous?
Well, it's not defined yet, so we can work with anonymous validators. I would prefer pseudonymous validators. If people trust a completely anonymous validator that just pops up, calls themselves Lizardman1, and then expects everybody to delegate stake to them, it's probably a little bit easier if you say, I'm Electronic Foundry Foundation validator, I have a trust relationship already, trust me. So it doesn't mean per se that we don't have anonymous validators, but it makes it much easier if you have a name that is linked to a reputation. And there's some things that come later with, for example, geography. We want to have geographically diverse validators. If you're completely anonymous, it's very hard to figure out where you are. So that's, I would prefer in that sense not to have anonymous validators, but I also don't want to rule it out at this point.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting. That's going to be interesting to watch that develop, because I know that there's this big. I don't know if it's a fight, but it's a philosophical debate between anonymous teams and doxed teams, and so I think it'll be fun to watch this play out in Vega.
Yeah. We should be prepared for everything. We need to see how it pans out. My personal opinion is a little bit more like privacy. People have privacy, companies don't. And
right.
Validator in that case counts as a company. So people using Vega can be anonymous. If you're core part of the infrastructure, I personally would see you like a a big corporation and I don't want to buy my milk from an anonymous company.
Yeah, we found that one out back in, what was it, the 20s. Before that, the whole Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. Yeah, we know what happens when you buy milk from shady anonymous companies. We know exactly what happens, and it's not good. Okay, so what is the incentive structure for staking? Like, how are we paying people? Like what do you get for staking?
So essentially, there's a fee on the transactions in the end. So not on making a transaction, but if you make or not on for putting it on the chain, but if you make a successful trade, then there's a fee. And some fee of this is distributed to the validators and the delegators. And there's then a formula that essentially defines how much a validator gets. And this is where so we essentially have two ways to incentivize validators to act the way we want to. One is economically via that fee. So if you act in the interest of the network, then you end up with more money. And the other one is hard-coded in the protocol, which is more solid, but then we have a lot of mathematical impossibilities that we need to navigate, so that's hard. So the preferred version, if we can, is economical. So one example is we don't want whale validators. We don't want to end up with one validator owning 40% of all the stake.
Is that the only reason to not want whale validators? Is that they'll effectively own the network, or is there other reasons?
Well, there are dangers for the network. So if you have one party that represents too much stake, then they have we have this Byzantine agreement protocol where if 1/3 of the parties don't participate, then the protocol goes down. So if I now have one party that alone has more than 1/3, then they can single-handedly bring down the network, and that goes all against the spirit of decentralization.
Oh, totally.
It comes a bit out of the experience that other blockchains have made. Like what happened in Bitcoin is you do have economic of scale. So if I'm a big miner, then I make money that I can reinvest in my gig. Small people can't follow up the arms race anymore to buy the hardware. So in Bitcoin, we actually ended up surprisingly decentralized, given how open it is, because in the end, big validators earn the money to become bigger validators. And we want a mechanism to stop this economy of scale, or also if you have one hyper trusted party, that not everybody goes to them because we all trust whatever spiritual being came from the heavens and wanted to validators. So even then they shouldn't represent the whole, shouldn't have a too big weight.
Right, that makes sense.
We want to control via the incentivization process.
Right. I mean, I guess the problem where Bitcoin people were reinvesting and whatnot, it not only made whales, but it also dramatically decreased diversity of location, because all the miners migrated to where power is cheap, or where infrastructure is cheap, or where tax incentives are cheap. And that's, didn't it all end up in China? Aren't we like over 50% in China on Bitcoin right now?
Last time I checked 60%, but I heard since that somebody moved out of China. But yeah,
Oh, good.
If the Chinese government wants to cause trouble for Bitcoin, then they probably could.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
That's another thing that's sort of independent of the whales. So what worries me actually more there right now is the tendency for people to go into clouds. So if I want to start a validator tomorrow, I'm not buying the hardware, I'm going to the cloud. And if we end up with 5 small validators that all sit in the same cloud, probably in the same server room, then again, our entire decentralization is gone. So the other thing we are adding is a diversity system, which also goes via incentivation. So you have properties like geography, and people get more money if they have scarce properties. So if you run your validator from New Zealand, you will get a slightly bigger share than if you run your validator from probably London. I don't know how many validators.
So right. Okay. So obvious. Very first question: how do you avoid VPNs?
Well, the easy answer is there is limits on what we can avoid. So VPNs themselves is probably comparatively easy. If you use a VPN, you get much slower. We would see that you claim you sit in Australia, but you have the response time as if it goes Australia, New York, Australia, and back. So you will be a very low performant validator. We will see that. The goal in the end is not to completely avoid it. If somebody puts all the energy into trying to fool you where they are, they probably can. What we want to make sure is that it's less effort to just be honest and be where you claim you are than cheating the system.
Honestly, I think that right there is a great philosophy just in general.
It's an economic incentive. So we have seen hackers that are willing to lose a lot of money just to prove a point. There was one famous hack of the rental bike of the German Bahn, where afterwards the hackers themselves said, if I'd actually gotten a real job with the time I spent into hacking that thing, I could have bought 100 bikes. They still did it. And
man, nerds are gonna nerd. It
so,
is, yeah.
But the other thing is, even if the properties are imperfect, so we will never be able to be completely sure, but it's still better than just giving up the fight and say, well, then all go to the same place. It's the same with whales. So if I have an anti-whale policy, then I allow for sybil attacks. And yes, Bitcoin is sybil free. It doesn't help you being a miner if you split up into several pretend entities. But that is because I gave up the fight before it even started and said it's okay to have miners with arbitrary size. If we start to put it down, then there is a possibility of sybil attacks. If somebody does it well, we have limits. There's a lot of small technical things, which then will be a small arms race on hiding your properties versus revealing them. But in the end, we say it's worth a try. We make a best effort to validate the properties. And if you're found lying, since your entire system bases on trust, then you're immediately dead as a validator. So you should also wonder, is it worth the risk of being completely kicked out and having my name ruined forever with a reputation I built? Even if you're anonymous, you may build a reputation over time. So is it worth?
Yeah,
is it worth?
Sorry. Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna say like Blue Kirby, right? Nobody knows who Blue Kirby is, but if he starts messing up and starts ruining his reputation and whatnot, even though he's anonymous and whatnot, that all that good or pseudonymous, I guess, all of that goodwill just kind of goes poof. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense actually. How do upgrades work with this? So we have these different network, or we have the different nodes, we have the different validators. What do all the validators have to be on the same exact version? Are we going to end up with forks? Talk about that a little.
Well, we could have a system where all the validators need to be on the same version, and then say this is the update. It will be valid from block 10,519. So for block 10,920, better do the upgrade. I personally, since with experience on other upgrading system where this kind of things just never work, somebody is always late, somebody had a bad internet connection, whatever, I would prefer that we have a similar system as we have with TCP IP security. That I can say there is now version 1.2. I'm now speaking 1.2. I recommend everybody to upgrade to 1.2. And in 2 months, I don't talk to you anymore if you're still on 1.1. And so then we could have a sliding upgrade, and unless it's an emergency upgrade. So if we realize, oh my God, there is a bug that somebody can steal all the money, upgrade now or else. And then we could really say from the next block on have the update, and then probably the network would have a small hiccup. So then we have one block where it may take 5 minutes for the next block to be generated. But in general, a sliding upgrade would be a better idea to just ease the synchronization pain. And we may have validators that are also distributed over several machines that all need to be upgraded. So if you go into details how those things work in the end, sliding is much better.
Yeah, I agree. Because the Tendermint base we're using doesn't support fork, I mean, wouldn't naturally cause a hard fork, would it? Wouldn't it just like crash?
Well, it depends on what the update does, but if I don't accept your messages anymore, so we can tolerate outage of 1/3 of the validators. So if everybody is honest and 2/3 update makes the update, then the chain will continue and drag the others along. If we have a 50-50 split and people don't recognize each other's messages anymore, then yeah, the network stalls.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Cool. Okay. Let's go back to the staking. The question here is, what are the biggest risks and most untested parts of the staking design in general? And how do you hope to test them with testnet and early alpha mainnet?
I would say the biggest risk is it's all in the end a big game theoretic game. And we hope that especially in the beginning, people have Vega in mind and not their money. So I would hope that if I'm a delegator, and I know me as a delegator, I will act that way. I don't try to completely optimize my revenue. If there's a validator run by the Lizardman that offers me tenths of a cent more than serious validators, then I go to the serious and I'm willing to lose a little bit of money. The biggest risk is that we missed something in game theoretic, that somebody somehow has an incentive that we didn't see. And there was one that actually popped up lately that with the interaction with the smart contract, that everybody who moves money between the smart contract and Vega needs to sign a multisig, so they have a financial incentive in terms of gas cost to have as few validators as possible.
Oh, right. I remember finding that one. Yeah. That is weird. How are we dealing with that?
Right now we are not. So still thinking about something. We have a minimum amount of validators, and that's a governance vote. So we would hope that the people that profit from this, A, don't have a majority, and B, see the stability of Vega more important than saving a little bit of gas on reducing the number of validators. But it's that kind of thing that somewhere someone has an incentive that we missed. Or another thing that I initially missed was whale delegators. So say I get a huge amount of Vega tokens that I all delegate. And then I have the feeling somebody may have stolen my passcode. So I want to move all my tokens to another account. That could actually be critical because I need to undelegate them before I can move them. So without wanting to, I could knock out a validator temporarily. And nobody would die if that happens, but it's also a scenario we don't want. And we have now countermeasures for that, if a validator suddenly loses tokens without the people that undelegate explicitly saying, I hate that guy, I don't want them to be a validator anymore, then the validator has a grace period that would give their delegators the time to reorganize, come back and redelegate.
Yeah, it's a undelegate with a vengeance, basically.
Yeah. And for testing, the best thing would be to actually build a simulator and let people go wild on try to steal money, and whoever steals the most money gets equivalent in tokens or ice cream or.
I really like that one. That one's going to be a fun game to play. I really like that. Okay, so speaking of delegators, how many delegators, or sorry, no, that should have been validators. How many validators will the Vega network require? You said it was governance token. How are they chosen? That was the follow-up.
So what's the question now? How many validators we need, or how they're chosen?
Yes.
Both. Okay. So there's a system parameter for the minimum amount of validators that we feel comfortable with. And that system parameter determines the minimum amount of stake you need to actually be a validator. The number on what we are comfortable with, so theoretically 4 is the minimum number where you can tolerate one outage, but that's very low. So I personally would say in the very early test net, it should be 7 that tolerates 2 Byzantine corruptions. But then around 20 would be a good number to feel comfortable. And also if you want to add diversity, if I have only 4 validators, then it's very hard to be diverse. I can't even cover all continents. So my guess would be that from 20 on, we can be comfortable. If it gets in the direction of 3 digits, then we need to be careful with performance loss.
Okay, that was I was going to ask. And then the other one, okay, no, that's good info. Okay, do delegators, when they delegate, do they also delegate their governance voting power?
No, absolutely not. And the government's voting power is, for example, regulating the validators. So you definitely don't want to give that power to the validators themselves.
Oh, that's a good point.
There may be eventually some things where we may say this is actually the best thing for the validators to decide themselves, something implementation or performance related. But for now, the validators are an infrastructure provider, and you only delegate to choose who provides the infrastructure and gets paid. But all governments, all political decisions do stay with the token holders.
Oh, okay, cool. So
one comment on there, that's also why we are trying to motivate in-system delegation. So in some other networks, we have seen that somebody comes and say, give me your rights and I give you 5 Bitcoin for that. So we want all delegation to be inside of Vega so that we are sure that there are no strange policy things going on. If people start with liquid staking, like borrow a lot of money, borrow tokens, that they don't immediately get government's rights and can buy out the network.
Yep. Flash loan attacks, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can the tokens, once they're delegated, be used as margin in a market?
No.
No. Okay.
That's
so any
and if you risk your token somewhere else, you can't use it for delegation.
Cool, and that makes sense. What about locked up or vesting tokens? Can they be delegated?
Shouldn't be any problem with delegating them. And since at the beginning all tokens are actually locked up, or we would have a very, very empty validator set if we didn't allow that. So yeah, there's no problem with locked up tokens. If you delegate, they're locked anyhow, so then they're just locked twice.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. We've covered that one. For anyone watching, I've got a list of questions. Not all this is in my head. I'm just, riffing with Klaus here. I've actually got a list of questions. Okay. Once I've staked, how do I check how things are going?
That's a good question. So in principle, everything is visible on the chain. There's some other parameters that we will measure. So one other policy is that we want to reward performance of a validator. So the problem we want to solve there is that I start a validator with my Raspberry Pi, become very trustworthy, but I never help Vega because my Raspberry Pi is way underpowered. So we want to have performance measurements in, and those results and also would be visible to delegators. So if you see, oh, this guy promised the world but isn't performing at all, then you can also undelegate me. But in general, everything should be visible on the chain. And well, I'm not the user interface guy, but it should be reasonably easy to then build a user interface that you can see how validators perform, what they got, or what would happen if you would delegate to them.
Okay.
And if you get what you should.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this will be the last question before we wrap up and take questions from the community. So in practice, how do you stake? What do you do?
Well, if you're a token holder, you have a pseudonymous identity. And with this identity, you can essentially put a command on the blockchain that says, I want to stake that amount of my tokens to that guy over there. And that's essentially it. We have divided the chain in epochs. That's for stability, so you don't, if people keep changing their mind, that we don't keep changing the validator set. So during an epoch, you decide what to do with your token, and for the next epoch, that's a delegation that will be valid. So should be simple. Again, I know nothing about user interfaces, so I don't know how that will look like, but from a protocol perspective, it's just a signed message. I want to delegate.
That's awesome. I've been a firm advocate of making things simple because bad UI and UX, over complex systems, over complex interaction just makes people not use it. So no, that's good. The easier, the better.
Complexity makes security errors.
Also that, yeah, that is a damn good point.
If you ever want an example of this, look up London ambulance disaster. It has nothing to do with blockchains. It's actually pretty tragic, but it's a very, very good story on don't run systems you don't understand.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna read that, or I'll read that after this. Just sounds super interesting. Okay, I think that wraps up my questions. I'm sure I missed something important in there somewhere, but I will hand it back over to Christina. Thank you, Klaus. That was good info.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. So for anyone listening now, we had quite a few people join along the way. If you have any questions, now is the time to write them in the chat. I think what you guys must have said must have been perfect. We've only had one question. And that is if you could say something about the requirements that you expect from a validator to have in the data center.
Well, we want validators to be halfway serious. And one of the properties I didn't mention is that in addition to not having whales, we also don't want to have splinters. So we don't want micro validators. You will need a minimum amount of stake to validate. And essentially, we want it to be a serious operation that knows how to reliably run a server 24/7. If something goes wrong, that you don't find out by the time the owner wakes up the next morning, but you have a professional operator on time, always on call, sufficient bandwidth, sufficient computing power to be fast, ability to keep your server secure. We are not helped by diversity if half of the validators can be hacked by a 14-year-old. But yeah, essentially, I think if you sum it up, it's be a serious enterprise or a serious validator, and nothing against 14-year-olds, but there are other networks that are much better to have 14-year-olds running them on their cell phones than Vega.
That's a good point.
If you're 14-year-olds and runs a really serious validator, so they do exist, absolutely come in. But
oh yeah, hit it. Yeah, let us know, like by all means. But yeah.
And then we have a couple more questions come in here. So first of all, how many independent workloads and services might we be expected to run as a validator on Vega, e.g. core, price proxy, etc.?
I have no idea. And my vision of a validator that the staking goes for is that the validator runs a blockchain. If they do other services, from my point of view, that's fine, but that's out of the scope of the staking. And I have to admit, I haven't thought about that at all, what goes wrong if validators take on 5 other roles in this thing. I don't see a big problem with this, but I don't want to say there is none because I haven't really spent any time thinking about that yet.
That's fine. Second question, will we be supporting Cosmovisor to propagate validator software upgrades throughout the network?
Oh, that's again an implementation question. So Danny, do you have any idea?
No idea. None. Sorry. Yeah, but if that question is super important to people, we can get the info to you.
That would be the right question for Discord, where the whole group can then answer. So.
Oh yeah, no, this is a great time to plug Discord. Anyone who hasn't been on Discord, please go get on Discord. All the info's there. We've got documents.
Yeah, I'll send the invitation link in the chat now as well. Third question, what kind of slashing parameters are you considering for the network?
Right now we are not slashing. So you lose your trust as a validator, you lose your business because people go away, but right now we haven't implemented any slashing in there.
And you don't get the reward for the epochs you mess up.
Yeah, so you miss your reward. And if somebody behaves in a way that it's easily discoverable, usually there's nothing to win anyhow. So I don't really see a business model in behaving stupidly and risking your trust. So at the moment, there is no slashing. There may be a requirement that you need to own your own tokens. So at least buy a few tokens that you represent yourself. But it's not planned at this point that they're slashed if you're kicked out. You're just kicked out.
And then final question here, what about centralized entities trying to outperform and manipulate and push out non-centralized entities, delegators? How will you prevent that kind of madness?
Not entirely sure what that aims for. So we have designed it in a way that we ideally have a reasonably large number of validators. That's the anti-whaling thing, that no centralized entity can become the super validator that then runs half the network. Any individual entity can only get, let's say a random number, 10% of voting power in the consensus protocol, and that's where it stops. If somebody really spends an enormous amount of money, builds 50 different entities, builds a trust relationship for all of them. So if you have a sort of NSA collaborates with FSB to subvert Uyghur, then at some point we probably do have a problem. But generally, I think we have made it, well, if we have those kind of enemies, you have a different problem anyhow.
That's a good point.
I do think we have made it reasonably hard. If you want to rephrase the question to make it a bit more precise, then I can probably give a more precise answer on how we defend against this.
Well, let's see if it comes up.
Else, I'm also happy to engage in a discussion on Discord on details on how we protect against
10%. Okay, yeah, 10% max answered it. Thanks. Was the reply here. Okay, guys, do you have any final words of wisdom?
I've never really been known for wisdom.
No, he's more of a smart ass than a wise guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got too. Thank you, everyone.
One word of wisdom, we have a blog series out, and today we should come out with the second one, which also explains the staking system, staking in more detail, and there will be a third and hopefully also a fourth part. And then you can read all the policies, what was the thinking behind the various policies we want to implement, and how do we implement them on the various levels. So if you want a bit more details than you get out of an interview, there's a blog series and eventually, hopefully also a more scientific paper. And
that's awesome. And we lost Christina. Hey, yeah. Sweet. I guess it's just you and me now.
Well, we're still live.
I know, right? What horrible things can we get up to in the next couple minutes before Christina gets back to rein us in?
Sacrificial pancakes.
I mean, if you want to plug that, we can plug that. Ah, she's back. Darn. Good timing. Good timing. Maybe is she back? Are you back? Yeah, maybe not. All right. I make music. Go to sacrificialpancakes.com. There's NFTs and stuff. There's cool Vega NFTs coming at some point as well. Only me and Klaus and Christina know about this. So everyone else at the team who just went, wait, what? Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a plan. It's nice. Okay, that's all I got.
I think I just had some, my internet just cut out, but I kind of returned.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
You wouldn't let us talk about it.
That's good. Okay, thank you so much. The next Deconstructing Vega event will be on market creation, hosted by Tamerlan, which is next Tuesday at 6 p.m. GMT. So watch out. Thank you so much, guys. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.